So you just bagged your big customer, dream customer, $50,000 contract value. You were almost about to celebrate, but then you saw security requirements, PCI DSS, high trust, HIPAA, ISO 27001, FedRAMP, FISMA, and now you're confused. You have two options. Just go ahead and sign the contract, enjoy the day, and then worry about security later, only to realize that that's going to cost you $150,000 to meet. You have a smarter way. And in this video, I'm going to tell you what are the 5 powerful strategies you could employ to kind of get the best deal. Hi, my name is Rohit. I've spent 20 years in cybersecurity working for smaller companies, startups, and I'm currently working for a Fortune 5 company. I started this channel so that I can give you tools, tips, insights, so that you can become a better co-founder, CEO, CTO, and understand how cybersecurity requirements are met and handled with big corporate clients. Trust me, I've been on both sides, so I totally understand how it works. Strategy number 1, does it even apply? So most of the contracts that you see, they are cookie cutter. They're coming from a procurement team who has to onboard vendors. So the contract language that you see is not done for you. It is a cookie cutter approach. They have a template that they send to all their vendors. It doesn't matter what you provide. One of the strongest strategies that I would recommend is to check. Go through the list of all the standards mentioned there and see, does it even apply? For example, if you're selling a project management software, but the contract asks for PCI DSS compliance or HIPAA compliance, then it doesn't apply to you. Why? Because you are just a project management software. You do not touch their protected health information or credit card information. So it should not even apply to you. So one of the first strategies is go through the list of all the standards mentioned in the contract, go through them and make sure they all apply to you. Make sure they all apply to the service or the product you are providing to this big corporation. And after reviewing, if you feel like the standard doesn't apply to you or the services you're providing, tell them to remove it from the contract. You should not be adhering to this requirement as it doesn't apply to you. Strategy number 2, inherited compliance. Now, most of the time they'll ask you to do FedRAMP or they would ask you to do PCI DSS. But nowadays, all modern software are hosted on some platforms. So for example, you might be hosted on AWS. Now, if you are hosted on AWS by itself provides you a lot of certifications. For example, if the contract asks for FedRAMP, you can just say that, hey, we are hosted on AWS, which is FedRAMP moderate authorized, for example. The other example can be your application processes payments, and now they're asking you to have PCI DSS compliance. You can always go back and say, hey, we outsource all our payments to someone like Stripe, and Stripe has the PCI DSS certification. So this actually helps you negate some of those requirements because you're outsourcing it to big tech companies who spend millions of dollars to make sure they're compliant. So use this hack. It's a very powerful strategy where you try and push some of those compliance requirements to your vendors and get off the hook, because these are $1 million companies who are already spending all this money to protect their infrastructure. So you should just piggy bank on whatever they are already doing. Strategy number 3, self-attestation. Now, many a times your contract will say things like, hey, you have to be compliant to FISMA, or hey, you have to be compliant to HIPAA, or hey, you have to be compliant to GDPR. Now, these 3 standards that I spoke about are not auditable standards. So these are laws which have been put in place by the constitution of that country. So how you can tackle them is this. You can create a one-pager, or maybe you'll need more than 1 pages. So you can create a document which specifies how you meet all these requirements, which are not actually auditable. These are laws, and you can create a document more like a report, which can be a self-assessment report, which explains how you meet all these requirements of this particular law and you're compliant. And so there's a difference between compliant, audited, certified. These are laws. You only have to comply to a law, not get audited. So before you think you need an expensive auditor who's gonna come and audit you and give a report, there are a lot of situations when it is not even required. Strategy number 4, the questionnaire compliance. Now, this is a very powerful strategy and it's actually used a lot in the corporate environment. So what you do is, After you do your cost benefit analysis, so let's say you realize that what I'm selling is worth $50,000, but the audit requirements will leave me spending $100,000. So what you can do instead is be open to something where they can send their vendor security department to come and audit you. So they can either come and physically audit you, and most of the time companies sends questionnaire. So basically what they'll do is they'll send you a questionnaire and then you can go ahead and fill it. Now this will require some time expenditure because you'll have to pull out some of your resources to complete a big questionnaire coming from a vendor, but you're gonna save on that $100,000 audit requirement. So you have to do like a cost benefit analysis if it's worth going for the questionnaire or if it's worth saving time of your resources. But that's a very viable option. So rather than just saying yes for an expensive audit that you'll have to do every year, at times it's just better to spend 20 to 30 hours in completing the questionnaire, and then you're gonna eventually every next questionnaire you're gonna spend even more time. But the idea is you ask them to send a questionnaire to you, you complete the questionnaire. At times bigger companies do also follow up with an on-site assessment. You can be open for that as well and say, hey, yeah, sure, you can come and do an on-site assessment provided you give us a 30-day advance written notice. And that way you have a heads up that an auditor might show up. You also get some time to prep in case if you feel like you need to prep something. But that's also a very strong strategy where you just ask them to send a questionnaire, and they can also send their auditors if they want to. Usually it's only the questionnaire, and that's how it works. But I've seen some companies sending in their auditors as well. Strategy number 5: put money where your mouth is. So what this means? This means is, again, taking the same situation, $50,000 worth of billing and $100,000 worth of audit. So what you do is you go back to your customer and say, hey, look, it's not financially viable for me to agree to your security audit requirements because they are so expensive. And I've seen companies happen to me as well, where they would push back and say, okay, you know what? And I've done it personally as well. So we push back the contract and say, look, this is what I already have available, and I'm not going to entertain any specialized one-off audits. If you really want, and all the above options do not work, for example, if they don't want to send their auditors, they don't want to do questionnaires, then what you can tell them is, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get the audit done provided you pay for it. So what happens is, what you'll do then is, rather than charging them $50,000, you'll add another line item. You'll say $50,000 for the product, $100,000 for the audit, because you're not going to pay it from your pocket. So what you'll essentially doing is you are making it more expensive for them to buy, and it's expensive because of their audit requirements. So I've seen this strategy works most of the times because now the internal stakeholder who really wants to buy your product is stuck, and it's stuck because of some additional requirements coming from their security department, and it usually acts as a very good lever or leverage, where now you have some internal stakeholders pushing the security team to use one of the other approaches, which is to maybe send their own auditors, or at times they do agree to pay. Like if the customer is really very solid about security, then that's the price they'll have to pay if they want to buy your product. So we talked about the 5 strategies you could use to push back your customers into being more reasonable with their security requirements. But this is the ideal strategy. I'll also call it the anchor strategy, where, I mean, while you can still use all the other 5 methods I told you, but I think it's really most important for you to come out as a company which is reliable, which takes security very seriously. So this is how I would do it if I have to do it all over again, or if I have to do it for a new company. I would align myself to a standard, and I will also pick an audit that I would do. So for example, if you are a SaaS company, you can align yourself with something like ISO 27001, or you can align yourself with something like NIST CSF, and you can go for a SOC 2 assessment. So that way you say, yeah, you are aligned to one of these standards and you have an audit report. Or maybe if you are a healthcare company, you can align yourself with high trust. Or maybe you are a defense contractor, so you can obviously align yourself to CMMC compliance. So you have options. So pick an anchor That will drive your company cybersecurity strategy, also aligns yourself to a standard, also provides you with a report that you can hand over to your customer to build trust. But that is where it should stop. Like, you should not try and do cocktails. Like, I've seen companies where you would mix high trust with SOC 2, which becomes a big mess. I've also seen situations where you just keep on saying yes to each and every audit. So yeah, so basically figure out your anchor strategy, stick to it, and use the 5 other strategies that I explained to kind of push back so that the whole situation becomes more reasonable. Now, I know I used a lot of keywords here: ISO 27001, HIPAA, high trust. What I plan to do is keep on building from here. So what I plan to do is create another video that talks about what these are, how do you divide them. Like, some of them are laws, some of them are frameworks, some of them are standards. What does it mean? How do they apply? How do they interact with each other? Which ones you should follow? So please subscribe if you want to. And then yeah, I plan to just bring all the knowledge that I've captured for last 20 years for your disposal. Thanks for watching.